Hey everybody, welcome to week 4. It's our last week together, rounding home, almost finished. So this last week we have a lot of things to talk about. 4 topics in particular. First, administrative law. Second, we'll talk about secondary sources. Third, we will talk about local and municipal law. And fourth, we'll talk about referrals. So first, let's talk about administrative law a little bit. It's the third big basket of legal information that we'll talk about in this course. So in week 2, we talked about legislative materials, which is focusing on statutes. Last week was judicial materials. So we've spent a lot of time on case law, opinions, orders. And then this week, we're going to hit the third branch of government, which is the executive. And to oversimplify things, we're going to talk about regulations. So regulations exist as a form of lawmaking conducted by administrative agencies, which exist to execute the laws. But agencies can't do whatever they want. Agencies can only do what the creating entity authorizes them to do. And in most instances, that is the legislature. So for federal, it is Congress, for example, creating the EPA, giving the EPA a set of parameters within which they can write regulations and how they keep the agency in check, making sure they don't exceed their delegated authority. And in state legislatures, they create agencies to fulfill a particular mission to provide the level of detail that the legislative body can't do. They take advantage of expertise in the form of administrative agencies to carry out the goal of the legislature. But these exist in the executive branch because the whole point of the executive branch is to execute the laws and to enforce the laws. So that's what we're going to spend a decent amount of time this week on that. Most of the slides deal with administrative law. Administrative law can be a little confusing. There are a couple really big questions on your research assignment that get really nitpicky. One of the things that I will point out now that might help you when you do your research assignment is the structure and organization of regulations. One of the big things that I want you to get out of this is a lot of agencies organize their regulations into parts. Parts are usually big topical subjects within an agency's jurisdiction, within their purview of expertise. So part with a capital P is going to be very important in your research assignments. And whenever I ask for a title, that's usually going to include a number and a name, but sometimes I will specifically say, what is the title number? So be really, pay really close attention to that. I did my best to make sure on the research assignment that every time I'm in a part as a container of regulations, I used a capital P. So, but again, the organizational structure of regulations, and we're going to focus on federal, and the Code of Federal Regulations can be pretty complicated. So if at any point you don't feel like you're doing things correctly, feel free to reach out and ask questions. So yeah, that's administrative law. The second thing we're going to talk about is secondary sources. Those were alluded to during the first week of class, the difference between primary authority and secondary authority or secondary sources. So primary is everything we've talked about up until this point. So cases from the judiciary, statutes from the legislature, regulations from the executive branch agencies. Secondary sources are commentary. They're resources that explain the law. They're written by practicing attorneys, law professors, law students, judges. They attempt to do a lot of the research work for you. And when you don't know much about a particular area of the law, secondary sources help explain it to you. And then they cite the law to you. So you're getting not only an explanation, but you're getting references to the underlying law that they're analyzing so that you can go read it yourself. They contextualize the law, and they come in a lot of different formats. Everything from a legal encyclopedia to really, really in-depth law review articles on a niche subject that no one else has ever written about before, to multi-volume treatises. Nimmer copyright is easily, when was the last time I looked at this, 10 to 15 big 3-ring binders that are updated 3 or 4 times a year in print. So, any more than anything you'd ever want to know on copyright, NIMR likely has the answer to it. Some of them are intended for attorneys, some of them are intended for self-represented litigants. NOLO is a big publisher of books that attempt to explain the law to people without a legal background, and that's really important for some of us in the libraries that we are in. I know that a decent chunk of my budget is spent buying as many NOLOs as I can so that I can reach that particular audience and get legal information to them as well. But unlike the primary law, which is published by the government and is pretty easily accessible for free for everyone, secondary sources are not. Secondary sources have this value of explaining the law, and the government is not really in the business of doing that. So commercial publishers take it upon themselves to publish secondary sources. And because of that, they're not freely available online. There are certain secondary sources that you can only get on the big research platforms that we talked about in week 1: Westlaw, Lexis, Bloomberg Law, Wolters Kluwer Cheetah. I know I'm missing one. Bloomberg Law. So there are all of these big commercial entities that protect this content, and it's not freely available, which is why we're not going to get a chance to do anything with them in this course. We don't have access to Westlaw or Lexis or Bloomberg Law. What I did do is give you an example of what some of these documents look like. I downloaded some from Westlaw. They all have something to do with battery, and you can see what a legal encyclopedia entry for battery looks like, what a law review article focusing on battery looks like, what an ALR annotation on battery looks like, what treatise sections on battery look like. So again, those are in there for you to see how they vary in depth of coverage. You don't have to read them for content. They're not going to show up as a quiz question, but it's the closest I could get to let you see what these things look like if you're not fortunate enough to work in a law library that has these resources in print. Now, one exception to all of this are law review articles. Every law school in the country publishes at least one law review or a law journal within which are law review articles or law journal articles. These are student-run publications, so there is no such thing as peer review. Students decide which work of law professors and judges and attorneys make it into the journal. Law schools have an interest in open access to scholarship. So many, I won't say all because there probably are some exceptions out there that I'm not aware of, many law schools make access to their law review articles available for free online. Now, coverage will vary. Some law schools are just now getting up and running, putting their journals online. Some have been doing it for a really long time. So out of all of the secondary sources that exist in the world, the one that you are most likely going to find for free out there on the internet are law review articles. So just wanted to throw that out there. The third thing we're going to talk about is local law. We've spent a lot of time looking at federal law, and then secondarily, we've been looking at state law. Well, sometimes the legal information you need is neither one of those things. Sometimes it's zoning ordinances in a town. You know, one of your research questions this week will figuring out how high you're allowed to have a fence inside city property as in your front yard, how high it can be. So there are several online resources out there for this, and just wanted to just bring to your attention that not everything is a federal statute or a state statute. Not everything is governed by case law. Sometimes it is local law that's going to be the answer to what you need. So that's it for legal information. Once we cover administrative law, secondary sources, and local law, once we cover those things, that is the legal information that we'll talk about in this course. But the last topic we're going to talk about are referrals. So where we left off last week is we have someone who's come to us for help. We can make recommendations of legal information that is available in our library or available online to allow them to explore on their own and figure out whether the law as it exists, if it's fits their facts, because that's not something we can do. We can't apply law to facts for people. We shouldn't be answering questions. Should I, would you advise that I, what should I put in this particular blank on this form? You shouldn't be doing any of those things. So now we're going to close what I call the service loop. You can't answer the should question, but you can sometimes make a recommendation as to where they can go next. And generally speaking, this week we're going to look at each state's, through the discussion posts, each state's legal aid resources, state bar association referral services, information that's available online to help our patrons understand the law on particular issues. So, and we'll even talk about making referrals to particular service groups, such as veterans and people who need immigration assistance. So it's one of those things where you can't answer the question, but in a service mentality, it's moving people one step further to getting them the information that they need. So that's what we're talking about this week. 3 more types of legal information, and then closing the service loop with how and where to make referrals for legal assistance. Just like every week so far, there is a quiz, there is a research assignment, and there is a discussion post. It's coming into week 4, and some of you haven't even taken the week 1 quiz yet, which again is totally up to you. But I do highly encourage you that as soon as you watch all the videos for this week, go through the slides and read everything. Go take the quiz while it's fresh in your mind. It's one less thing you have to do later, because we're rounding home and this class ends on March 1st. One thing that I do want to point out is the research assignment is due on Sunday, as it always is. I will be grading things as they come in, but if you wait until Sunday, it's possible I don't even get to it until Monday morning. I'm not going to accept any resubmits after March 4th. The class is over essentially at that point. I'll have time to do one last pass for one resubmit by March 4th. I mean, you can submit more than once, but I just won't take any resubmits after March 4th, if that makes sense. So if you're confused about any of that at all, please just shoot me an email. So yeah, I hope you all have gotten a lot out of the class, and stay in touch with me. You've got my email address. Find me on LinkedIn if you want, and we can stay connected that way. But anyway, good luck, and let me know how I can help. And all right, bye.